Hey guys, Gun Goober here. Today we're talking about 922R and how it pertains to the Benelli M3. We just did a video on the Benelli M4, and this video is very much the same. There's just some slight differences. First of all, we need to go over what 922R is again. 922R is a regulation that limits the amount of foreign parts you can have in your shotgun or rifle if that shotgun or rifle is to have certain features that are deemed non-sporting. So for example, this Benelli M3 has a capacity of 7 rounds in the tube, as well as having a collapsing stock. And because these are considered non-sporting features, this gun is subject to the regulations under 922R, and there is a limit to the number of foreign parts that you can use on it. There is a list of 20 parts that the ATF considers when looking at a firearm. Not every firearm has all 20 of those parts, and some of those parts can be quite subjective. So I have reached out personally to the ATF to see what their determination is on what parts are contained inside the Benelli M3. I just want to publish this information to spread the word about this law. I don't think anybody has ever been charged specifically and only with a violation of 922R. However, there have been people charged with 922R in the past. However, that has been exclusively people who are being charged alongside other more serious crimes. So I'm hoping that after watching this video, you will be able to know what exact parts that you would need to replace in order to make your firearm be compliant. So even if you don't take my advice and change out the parts on your gun, at least you'll know what things to look out for if it ever becomes an issue for you. The Benelli M3 has 12 parts on it that are considered by the ATF when they are evaluating it for 922R compliance. This number increases to 13 if you have the collapsing stock and pistol grip, because those are no longer considered one part. When the stock and the grip are one piece together, they are only considered as one part. The easiest parts to swap on the Benelli M3 in order to reach the threshold are the trigger components. The trigger components come out very simply. Make sure to depress the bolt release. What you're looking at here is the fire control unit for a Benelli M3, and the Benelli M4 is very similar. The parts that you can replace are the hammer, the disconnector, and the trigger, as well as the entire trigger housing itself. This gives you 4 parts that you've replaced, and will make it so that you will never have any problems with 922R going forward, no matter what other parts you put on the gun. These parts are readily available from people in the United States, as there is a large following, and a lot of these parts are cross-compatible with the Benelli M4. You may need a set of snap ring pliers in order to take this trigger assembly apart. However, there are some models, as you can see with mine, where it is held in with a spring instead of a snap ring. So you might get lucky and you might not need it. The next easiest part to replace is going to be the follower. This will come out during the normal disassembly of your shotgun, unless you have upgraded to a factory tube like I have here, where the only way to get it out is to unthread the magazine tube, which is hopefully something that you won't have to do normally. However, you might not even have to touch that follower if you've replaced the trigger parts already, but it's just another option. These parts, because they are compliance parts, are helpfully marked US. However, none of the parts were marked Italy before or anything. So again, there's really no way for anybody to tell where these parts are from unless you directly admit and say, I put this part in and it was from a foreign country, basically. These parts, the follower and the trigger components, are the only parts that I'm aware of that you can replace with parts that are made in the United States for the Benelli M3. There are no barrels that are made, there's no receivers that are made, and I believe there's no magazine tubes either that are made for the Benelli M3 in the United States. Depending on which stock assemblies you try to get on here, perhaps there would be one. I think that Freedom Fighter Tactical, they're making a skeletonized stock, and I think that you might be able to get that to fit on here. However, it's very unlikely. The more likely thing is that you're going to have an Italian-made stock and Italian-made pistol grip that you're going to have on here. And so really, with the Benelli M3, the options are pretty much only to replace the trigger guard. There's no handguard either that's made in the United States. The handguard is integral to the function of the Benelli M3 because you can switch it to be pump action mode. It's not just a placeholder heat shield like it is on the Benelli M4. And there are no aftermarket front ends with rails or anything on it that I know of for the Benelli M3. That's everything for 922R on the Benelli M3. Before we close out the video, I'm going to go over what I've done to this specific Benelli M3 because I'm sure there'll be questions in the comments. Under here, I have a factory Benelli 7-round magazine tube that I got off of Benelli parts and installed myself. The magazine tube is installed into the receiver with red Loctite, so you do need a heat gun in order to break that Loctite and to take this magazine tube off and install your own. The original magazine tube would have only held 4 rounds and would have ended about here. There are extensions that you can make for the original one that bring it out to here. However, every time you want to field strip the shotgun, that means that your spring is going to kaboing out everywhere. And with this system, the spring stays in the magazine tube always. The only way to get the spring out of the magazine tube is you have to unscrew the whole tube from the receiver. And of course, after I did that once with the red Loctite, when I put it back, I only used blue Loctite, so it's going to be pretty easy to get back in there. But I don't foresee that being a near-time issue, as cleaning the magazine tube is something that you don't really have to do that often. Moving on, I have a Benelli enhanced bolt release. I have a Freedom Fighter Tactical lifter. I have an aftermarket trigger assembly and trigger housing, which cover all of my parts that I need to be replaced for 922R. On the top here, I have a Trijicon SRO on a ScalarWorks mount that's directly mounted to the receiver up there on those normal screws that are there. At the back here, I have a Benelli Supernova collapsing stock. On the other side, I have some Velcro for some shotgun slabs. You have to make sure this is far enough back on the receiver because when you pump the gun, this piece will overlap the receiver a little bit, so you can't have anything going out past to here. The Benelli M3 is a very interesting shotgun, being semi-auto and pump action. I think it's pretty cool that you could switch between, low power, less than lethal rounds perhaps, and full power lethal rounds. All right, that's everything about the Benelli M3. If you have any questions, let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching.